Hello and welcome. My name is Kerry Munson. I am here today with Tim Sheehan, and we will be presenting on NVMe Plugfest number 10. If this is your first time attending one of our NVMe webinars, welcome. If you have attended before, welcome as well. I hope you all find this presentation to be both informative and enjoyable. If at any time during the presentation you have a question, please submit it to the chat box, and we will address it at the end. So here's our agenda for today. I will be going over Intro to Plugfest number 10, and then I will hand the presentation over to Tim Sheehan. Tim will be going through NVMe over fabrics to start, both mandatory testing as well as a proof of concept test that we hope to be offering at this event. From there, Tim will move on to test updates for NVMe PCIe SSDs and NVMe-MI. From there, he will go on to test tool updates and then turn the presentation back to me. I will walk everyone through the process of reporting bugs using our UNH tools, that being my IOL. And then we will go on to how to prepare for a Plugfest and logistics. At the end of today's presentation, we will read off all the questions that come in throughout. So please, at any time, feel free to submit them, and we will get to all of these at the end. If you have to drop off at any time, we will be posting the presentation on our website as well as YouTube, both the recording and the slides. So a little bit about who we are. The Interoperability Laboratory, also known as IOL, is part of the University of New Hampshire, located in Durham, New Hampshire. The IOL is a nonprofit neutral third-party test lab, and we are run by mostly college students. There are about 120 undergrad and graduate students, as well as 20 full-time staff. So the people that are testing your products and working directly with you are mostly all college age. We have been involved with the NVMe Express since 2012, and since that time, we've hosted 10 plus NVMe Plugfest. I say plus because we did have a separate fabrics event in May, and we hosted our first off-site Plugfest with our friends over at Hust University in Wuhan, China this summer. So it was a very exciting and busy year for us. So some basics on NVMe Plugfest number 10. When is it? It is going to take place the week of November 12th through 15th. That is Monday through Thursday. At this event, we will be testing NVMe SSDs as well as fabrics products. And the primary purpose of this is to qualify products for NVMe Integrators list number 10. Secondary testing that will take place at this event is proof of concepts for NVMe TCP as well as DCB large build, which Tim will get into shortly. If you are unfamiliar with how Plugfests operate and what they are, I've attached a link to a what is a Plugfest video. So feel free to watch that after the webinar. Here's a little glossary of some terms that you'll find throughout the test plan, throughout this presentation, and perhaps on your test reports. And just a quick look so that you understand what this means when you do come across it. Here we have a look at the 3 NVMe Integrators lists. Right now we have added 161 products to our NVMe SSD and host list, and the purpose of all 3 of these is to continually add more to them. at this next event next month, we hope to see a lot more added to it. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn the event over to Tim.
Thanks, Kerry. Hi, everybody. Tim Sheehan here from the University of New Hampshire's Interoperability Lab. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a senior manager within the data center outfits. And this is, again, the agenda that Kerry had just gone over, and I'll be covering the next 4 topics that you see on your screen, and then I'll be passing it off to Kerry. We'll wrap it up with just giving us some logistics on how and what we should be doing in order to prepare for the Plugfest that's coming up. So the first one I'm going to be covering is NVMe over fabrics, and this would be for RoCE, fiber channel, and also I'll be going through and stepping through some steps we took to set up the TCP test bed that we have. I'll then be having a few slides on the PCI SSDs, and that's obviously a test product that we've had here in Plugfest, as Kerry mentioned, for a number of years. And we'll also be going a couple of slides on the MI product that we'll be testing, and then just give you a little bit of information on the tool updates that we'll have. So again, for NVMe-oF over fabrics, things I'd like to be talking about specifically in this area will be the integrators list and some of the requirements that we have for that. Talking a little bit more about the interoperability and conformance tests that will be performed and some of the logistics there, but also some of the nomenclature. We'll talk specifically about the conformance tools. And then I'd like to walk you through the NVMe TCP setup that we had in the test bed that we've done here in the lab to use as a proof of concept in Plugfest number 10. So the NVMe Integrators list is a test program administered by the IOL for the NVMe.org organization in order to know and allow them to know and gauge the level of functionality in the NVMe industry for the products that are there. Today, the Integrators list will actually handle RoCE products, initiators, targets, and switches, fiber channel initiators and targets. And there is a document that we have, a policy document that is available on our website. The link is on this presentation on this slide. And the thing that I guess to know about each one of these integrators lists is there are separate integrators lists for PCIe testing, for MI testing, and also for the NVMe over fabrics testing. And the NVMe over fabrics testing is actually broken up between RoCE and fiber channel today. And we hope to get this and improve this and bring new transports also. In order to get on the integrators list, there's some basic tests you need to perform, as we all know, or you're learning. And in order, if you're an initiator or a switch, then you will need to perform interoperability testing, and you'd have to do that against 2 target interop partners. And if you're an actual target, then you would actually need to perform interop testing with 2 initiator interop partners, but also you would also need to perform and use the conformance test software that we write here at the IOL that conforms to the test plans developed out of NVMe.org. And the tests that are in the actual test plan developed by NVMe.org you would need to be able to test out the actual tests that have the OF designation to them, which is over fabrics. And just a little disclaimer at the bottom that you can have 2 partners could be the same actual piece of hardware as long as it's on a different OS or a different driver. This slide gives you a little representation of what we use generically for a test setup. You would have a server with an HBA or NIC resident in it, which would be connected up to a fabric, which would be at a minimum of 2 switches. And then that fabric would be connected up on the other side to an NVMe-oF target. And the whole idea is that your product could be any one of these products that you see here, either a server, switch, or target device. And what you're going to be able to do is follow the test suite, again, that we have a link for on this screen, in order to look for those OF test designations so that you'd know which test you need to actually pass in order to get on the integrators list. The interop testing that we have on the right-hand side, you would have be able to discover targets. You'd then be able to have to send traffic, and initially the first time we send traffic, it's for about 15 minutes. Then we're going to do a series of link pulls and power-up sequences, which would happen against each one of the elements that's in this topology. So the server would be brought down, brought back up, and we'd make sure we can move traffic or send traffic successfully for 1 minute. And then you would actually perform the same kind of link pull between the two switches, so the ISL between the switches, and then of course the link between the switches, the switch fabric and the target itself. So at this point, you would have to do a basic discovery, send traffic, perform the link pull test, again send traffic to make sure the connection is reestablished successfully, and then you would have to do a power up sequence, again, just like the link pull sequence of each one of the devices in the fabric to make sure that it's able to come up successfully, discover, connect, and then actually move IO traffic. This is the basic setup that we have for RoCE today in our lab. You can see the actual RoCE initiator has the Mellanox Connect 4 with edge core switches. We also have Mellanox switches that could be substituted in this particular position for the switching fabric. And then again, Mellanox Connect 4 as a target also. Again, as the box stipulates down in the left corner, you can substitute your product into any one of these positions. On the fiber channel side, again, same type of setup for Interop. What you're really going to be able to do is substitute your product in at any one of these positions, and you can see the type of devices you have today in the fiber channel setup, all 32 gig, which is the latest and greatest shipping for fiber channel. And we have this complete test setup, both of these for RoCE and fiber channel set up today in the lab so we can perform the interoperability testing for you. But again, we'll be setting up the same thing at the Plugfest to make sure that we'll be able to perform the interoperability for everyone there. This is a new area that I had mentioned, TCP, NVMe over TCP. This is a new set of standards that have come out of NVMe.org. This particular test suite is the same kind of setup in the test bed that we test out for fiber channel and RoCE. But what you see here is obviously we're doing it over TCP. And you would have a different NIC, Ethernet switches, and target devices here. What I put inside the initiator or the server box to the left is actually what we use for a kernel, an OS and a kernel version in order to set up this TCP topology. But you can see that really it's the same kind of setup as we use for RoCE and for fiber channel. And this is what we're hoping to use as a proof of concept test bed towards the latter part of the Plugfest week that'll happen November 12th to the 15th. If you were to look at the actual NVMe conformance test that we have, moving on to conformance, you'd see that the actual designation of each of the tests on the right-hand side in the box would have the OF against them. You see group 1, which is the admin command set. You see test 1.1, which is the identify commands within that admin command set. And the identify command has an M and an OF in the actual designation of the test. The M is for PCI, so the first slot position in the parentheses, and the first slot is the mandatory for PCI. But the second one is the OF, which we're really going to focus on right now, which is over fabrics, okay? And if you have an OF in that second designation on the test plan, then what that means is this is a mandatory test that must be passed in order for your product, which would be a target at this point because we run conformance tests only on targets, that it would need to pass in order to get onto the integrators list. So as you look down through the cases that are in that particular diagram that we have, you would see that there are particular test cases that are both designated as MOF, but then you have an MOF FYI, which is in case 3, and you also have case 4, which is an OF IP for the fabrics portion. And what happens is anything that is OF FYI is just that, an FYI for your information. And this is not a test that needs to be passed in order to meet conformance criteria to get on the integrators list, nor is the OFIP. This would be in progress, so it's being developed today by the NVMe.org. And it's one that does not need to be passed in order to meet the conformance criteria to get on the integrators list. So again, it's only the OF tests that need to actually pass successfully in order for your target product to get onto the conformance test, integrators list, sorry. And again, if yours is a target product, just like we had said in one of the previous slides, you would have to perform and successfully complete the conformance testing, but you would also have to do the interoperability testing with 2 partners. One other thing to mention here, and that's the last bullet, which is that the testing that we're performing here for the Plugfest and also as part of the NVMe-oF testing here at the IOL, it really does not verify or test the binding specs for the particular transport protocol that you'd be going over. So that would be fiber channel, RoCE, or even TCP, moving forward. And what you'd use to perform the test is the IOL INTERACT PC edition. Today we have the PC edition for fabrics. We have a PCI version, but for fabrics we have it for fiber channel and also for RoCE. And this is an application that's going to run on an initiator or a server side, and it would go across the fabric and act as an initiator, which would interact with the target through the fabric in order to perform conformance tests to make sure that your actual target device adheres to the conformance of NVMe specifications. One of the big benefits that you have as a member of the IOL, either the NVMe, the Ethernet switching protocols, ESP group, or the fiber channel group, is that you would get a copy of this conformance software as part of your membership. And this allows you to perform in-house testing, before you bring the product either to the Plugfest to be tested, or to also, or whether you shipped it to the IOL to perform, testing remotely on your device. The screenshot just shows the basic screen of our front panel on the GUI of the IOL PC edition. And of course, the link that we have there will be able to download the software once you're a member. The conformance is almost exact to the interoperability testing we have. You've got a server, and again, the thing that you'll notice is definitely the kernels and the OSs that are required for the Interact to run on are specified here now because we need to have certain versions there. You'd be going through the same switching fabric to get to your NVMe target or your RoCE target at this point, and you'd perform and run the Interact software on that server. It would go through the switch fabric, be able to exercise the target product, and provide you with the pass-fail criteria that you need in order to get onto the Integrators list. Again, your device could be any one of the products in here. If it's the target product, you would perform conformance testing and interop testing. If yours is a server, initiator, or a switch product, then you would only need to perform interop testing. If we were to look at the fiber channel setup, again, very similar to the Interop, you'd have all the same kind of devices, except this time we're going to be running the actual Interop PC edition, Interact PC edition software on the actual server and running it across the fabric, the fiber channel fabric in this case, to make sure that it actually, your target product would adhere. To talk a little bit about the tests and tools, really your conformance test suite, your interop test suite, your integrators list, your software tools, as well as the Plugfest themselves all move together lockstep. This particular Plugfest that we're having is Plugfest number 10, which means the conformance, interop, and integrators list and software tools are also number 10. You'll see that we have major releases that come out, and this would be considered a major one. They come out twice a year. It comes out approximately 2 months. The software will come out approximately 2 months before the Plugfest. It will actually provide and have major test changes that come out of the NVMe ICC group. And those would actually be released, like I said, 2 months before the actual Plugfest. There's also a new technical process, the TP process from the ICC that's used today in order to manage these processes and get them out. We do have minor releases that happen in between those 6-month releases. And really what those are going to have are a lot of bug fixes, new user functionality, and any kind of enhancement to the actual test suite that might happen through the ICC during that 6-month period between major releases and or Plugfest. So the ICC, for those of you who don't know it, is the Interop and Compliance Committee of NVMe.org. They are the ones who help administer and manage the actual test program that we have here today. And of course, any input that you might have, obviously they have meetings every other week on Tuesday afternoons, 2 o'clock Eastern time, I believe, and you're all welcome to join because your input is greatly valued. Just to go over conformance tools again, these are all the conformance tools that we offer today. The IOL INTERACT PC edition is for testing out PCIe, And you can see that we are at version 10.0A. That's what's released today. We're looking at actually shipping 10.0B the end of this week. And if we get that out on time, it'll happen probably this Friday. And what you're going to see is we also offer some of the IOL Interact tests also on the Teledyne LaCroix edition of this particular tool. We use the Teledyne LaCroix T34 and the PET Tracer software 8.78 for doing our management interface, or MI conformance testing. This is the only tool that you can use to perform this kind of conformance testing to get on the Integrators list. There is no interoperability that happens in MI. There's only conformance. So this is the only way you can really test out your MI feature set in your product in order to get it onto the actual Integrators list. And then, like I said, there are separate Integrators lists for conformance for PCIe, MI, and also OF, which is over fabrics. And then at the bottom, you'll see that obviously there's the RoCE and the fiber channel 10.0A. They are all in lockstep, like I had mentioned on the last slide, between test plans, Plugfest, software, and yes. Now, one of the things about the PC, the Interact PC edition, is we're primarily using the NVMe CLI interface. This particular interface allows us to do many of the actual mandatory tests that we have within the test plan put out by the NVMe.org. But we also use, in a limited number of cases, we also use the TNVMe drivers and program that's actually an open source software that's available via GitHub. We actually will ship this particular TNVMe interface with our product, and it does perform some testing on a small subset of tests within that Interact PC edition. And I only bring this up because when we ship this TNVMe, there are obviously a lot of different tests that are available through it, and we only really support the ones that we need in order to perform the mandatory testing within the test plan itself. There are a number of other test scenarios that you can get within TNVMe, but really we will help you out in any way we can to help you resolve your issues with that, but it's really not something that we're supporting. But like I said, we'll definitely help you out any way we can. Some of them we've worked with, some of them we haven't. So we'll be working through it, at the same pace as you in those instances. The TNVMe is an older API, and really there's no fabric support for it. So it's really something that is, getting a little long in the tooth, and we're moving away from it. But it's something that is still with us today, and we'll keep track of that moving forward. Okay, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the NVMe over TCP. Some of the aspects of this and the setup that I'd like to talk about, and also we have for interop testing and conformance. And really what I'm going to do here is just kind of step through some of the pieces parts and what we needed to do in order to set up the actual test system. This particular slide has a target system. You can see the OS that we used, and it shows the actual target drivers as well as the NVMe modules that we needed to install on this particular target system in order to get it to actually accept TCP traffic, that is NVMe over TCP traffic. At this point, we needed to create a namespace for that physical drive mapping and make the subsystem in that subsystem directory, which is called Evo Target. We then wanted to make sure that we could have any host connect to it, so we needed to put the adder allow any host into that particular file. And as well, we needed to then create a namespace, which is, you could think of it as a virtual fabrics target creation, so that it is mapped to the first namespace that's actually on the physical drive. And that's what the second to last echo statement is doing, is making sure that you can map that namespace to the physical drive. Again, this is all in the target setup. And then the last part that we needed to do for the target setup was to create a virtual port. And what you can see here is that we've created a virtual port down on the echo statements that we have online, where we've said it would be an IPv4 address family. We've given an IP address that obviously is local to our particular network. We've given the actual service ID, which is the well-known 4420 number ID for NVMe. And then obviously the type that we have, which is TCP. And then we'd create a link for that, all within that same subsystem that we created in the last 3 slides, in order to actually make sure that the traffic coming in on that 4420 port on this particular IP address gets to the correct NVMe device. That would be the setup that we have for the target. And then we need to obviously set up the initiator. So the initiator here, you can see the different modules that we've installed here. And you've got the NVMe TCP module that's built upon the NVMe fabrics, which then is built upon the NVMe core. You can see the kernel OS and the OS itself, that's the kernel driver and the OS itself that are up at the top of the page. And really that's, you know, the initiator is a lot simpler device in order to set up. You just need to make sure you have these pieces that are all dependent upon each other. At that point, you'd be able to come along and perform a discovery. And the discovery, obviously, you can see from the command line up at the top, we give it the same IP address and the same service ID, the 4420. And what it's going to do also is it's going to show you what subsystems were created out there on this particular IP address at that particular ID. And if you had set up, we only set up one in this particular instance, but if you had multiple subsystems, they would all show up here. Then at this point, we'd perform, once you've discovered the actual subsystems that are out there on the target, you'd be able to perform a connect to them. And obviously you can see from the connect command towards the top of this particular diagram, you can see that you would have you would be connecting over TCP with an address of the IP we've been using with a service ID of the 4420. And the EVO target, if you were to look back a few slides on how we set up the target, we set it up as EVO target. And it would come back and make that connection to that particular EVO target. And then we'd be able to display information of that particular target. Now, this slide just shows the controller data structure of the target drive itself. It shows what's returned from the target system, but in some cases, this might not be what's actually exported from your product. But this happens to be what's actually the information of the controller data structure from the actual target system Linux drivers. So in some instances, there could be some confusion there. But we just wanted to show this to show you that, you know, we are able to connect to it. We are able to get actual NVMe data from it. It might not be exactly from your product, but it could be from the Linux driver. And that's, I just wanted to bring that up, you know, as a point, just so people aren't confused. And then we did take traces. We took a trace to show that we do have this up and running so that it's ready for the Plugfest and also for testing. We'd like to do NVMe over TCP as a proof of concept, as Kerry had mentioned early on in her slides. And what you can see here is you can see the addressing, you know, similar to what we had shown you in the actual setup slides. You can actually see the NVMe 4420 happening there. I think there's still some decode that needs to happen in the PCAP in order to show more information, but this gives you a general basic idea that, you know, things are up and working and that we're able to actually perform discoveries, perform the setup on the target, the initiator, perform the discovery, and then also make the connections and actually move data at that point to use some application to do I/O traffic. And that's pretty much the setup that we have for our TCP. Just wanted to give you all an idea of what we did to set it up and how we set it up. And again, the slide deck will be available for you so you can all take a look at that and verify or and get an idea of what you need to do in order to set up some of your own test beds. Now, the next steps for OF or fabrics, NVMe over fabrics. What we're really going to be looking for is the ICC, as I had said, the NVMe.org's Interop and Compliance Committee. They've obviously keep working diligently to come up with newer, better tests. The next test plan that we're going to have, which is number 11, will have somewhere in the order of 9 new tests that are all going to be coming out of the NVMe base spec. They'll also have 20 plus edits to the current test plan, number 10. And it looks like they're going to be doing some clarification on hot plug tests. But again, there could be more or less happening depending upon how these meetings go. And I would encourage everyone to get involved because your voice is definitely would like to be heard, especially if you have new ideas. We would obviously, if we're able to do the proof of concept for TCP on this Plugfest number 10 that'll be happening on November 12th, if that all goes well and we're able to get enough products to perform the interop and conformance testing that we'd like to, and we can show the ICC that, look, NVMe over TCP is here, it's here today, it's ready, and it can have interop and performance performed upon it successfully, then this could be something that we add in the future also for an integrators list feature also. So we'd love to do that, but also obviously it depends upon you, the customer, in order to bringing your product to the Plugfest or to the IOL in order to have it, tested and show that we do have NVMe over TCP products out there today that are stable, successful, and can pass the testing that we have. The third item that obviously we'd like to do is expand the integrators list that we have. As Kerry had showed you before, we've got a number of PCIe, MI, and also fabrics, RoCE and fiber channel, a number of devices that have already successfully attained the integrators list, and we'd love to keep that growing. So that's the end of my fabrics and what I'd like to talk about there. Next up would be PCIe. I've got a few slides on PCI SSD testing. This is something that we've done, as Kerry had said, for 5+ years, 10, 11, 12 different Plugfests. So it should be something that's well known to everybody, but we'll just hit on a few items just to make sure that everybody does. But if you do require more information, please let us know. The testing that happens would be for conformance, for conformance devices for PCIe, and of course you can use the PC edition or the LaCroix edition. All tests that are mandatory must pass, very similar to all the fabrics testing that we just went over. And of course, we give you some times roughly that it takes to perform these tests. Obviously that could vary depending upon the product. And then at the very bottom, you have the actual test suite, the link to the test suites again. So this is probably like the second or third time in the presentation you've got a link to the test suites. So please go out, take a look at them. You can get an idea of what we will be testing at the next Plugfest. Now really, in between the test plan number 9 and number 10, there are some minor changes that happen, but there are no major changes that have happened between 9 and 10, the Conformance and Interop test suites. We do use VDBench to perform our I/O testing. And again, I give you another one. You can get another link there for all the test suites. And again, the actual 90 minutes that it takes to perform the Interop testing, this is due to the number of rebooting of systems that you have to do in order to perform that Interop testing. And this next slide shows you the number of Interop systems that we have. This is a list that we have updated recently, and it's also up on our website, so you can get this. You can get it through our presentation or up on the website. You need to pass at least 5 of these in order to pass Interop testing. And these will be the ones that we'll be using during the Plugfest number 10. And I do have one slide on MI. Again, like I said, for MI, really we only perform conformance testing. There is no Interop test suite available today. We do use the T34. We use their software, the 8.78 version. That is the latest and greatest that's out there that we've tested with and verified using our particular test scripts that we write against the Teledyne LaCroix. You're able to download them, so please feel free to do so. And again, I think I've already hit on that the integrators list itself is independent from the PCI or the fabrics integrators list. Okay, and that's the end of what I'd like to talk about for fabrics, SSDs, and MI. And one last item I'd like to talk to you about is the test tools that we use to perform all this testing. As you can see from this particular slide, we have a number of test cases for each of these different kinds of interop and conformance test suites. The NVMe over PCIe has 220 conformance, 9 interop tests. The MI, which only has conformance, no interop, has 53. And then the NVMe-oF, whether it be RoCE, fiber channel, or even TCP coming up, these are the number of tests that you have within that. Now, these aren't the number of tests that you actually have to pass in order to get on the integrators list. You would need to just pass the mandatory ones, but we've already said that. And today it's available. Version 10.0a is available. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be shipping out 10.0b by the end of this week or early next week. And this will have a number of, I think at this point it's customer fixes for issues that have been brought up. We hope you can download this today. If you have a membership within the IOL, you're able to, within the IOL NVMe group or ESP or fiber channel group, you'd be able to download the software today via box. This slide just gives you an idea of the actual OS and kernels used to actually run the IOL Interact tool. You can see that they're different depending upon which type of transport you're using, whether it's PCIe, RoCE, fiber channel, or TCP. And they do differ because of the different types of underlying modules we need to use, such as NVMe CLI as well as TNVMe. And then one slide I just wanted to bring up again was just show the Teledyne LaCroix, the Interact Teledyne LaCroix setup. You can see it's very similar to the other setups we have, but you do need to run this on a Windows 10 PC with the actual Teledyne LaCroix PET Tracer 8.78, which would then go across Teledyne LaCroix to the actual analyzer exerciser to the actual DUT to make sure that it actually conforms to the test cases developed by NVMe.org. So that's what I had to present today. Next, I'd like to turn this back over to Kerry, who can give you some more logistics about the Plugfest and the IOL and make sure that your testing here is a success.
Great, thanks, Tim. Sounds like it's going to be a solid event. I'm looking forward to it. Moving forward, we will talk about reporting bugs. Something I know we're not fond of talking about. Wouldn't it be great? So right here we have the bugs that were reported between 9.0 and 10.0 for PC edition. On the left, there is a NVMe LDD number as well as the description of the bug that was fixed between the release. For the Teledyne LaCroix edition, there was 4 fixes between the 9.0 and the 10.0. So the process for reporting bugs, you will submit your issue to us and we will assign that issue a number. And with that number, you could follow back with us just to check the status. We will have the fixes during our releases, which are on a monthly basis. Unfortunately, we will only be doing the releases on our release schedule, unless there is a engineering release that needs to go out, and that is the only exception. So how to report a bug. Everyone with an NVMe membership will have access to the My IOL login. If you do not have credentials, please contact me and I will provide those to you. Once you log in, you'll come to your home screen here. On the sidebar, you will see Report a Test Tool Issue. Click on that, and there will be a drop-down tab with the different test tools that you have for your group. So if you're in the NVMe test service, you will have NVMe PC edition or NVMe Teledyne LaCroix edition. Select the test tool which you're reporting on. In the first box, you will talk about the test environment. So here you'll write which OS you used, the kernel version, and other sort of information relevant to the issue. Please provide as much information as possible. Chances are other people may report the same issue, and we just want to be sure we're getting as much detail as possible. If you have logs as well, those are helpful to us. So how to prepare. Download the tools and run them. They are all available on our UNH box file share, you will need a separate login different than your My IOL to access those. If your company has not yet submitted a licensing agreement, you can find this on our website. Also, bring 2 samples of each of your products, minimum. We need 2 samples to run the interop test, only 1 for conformance. Sometimes there are extra spaces in the schedule where you might get in early. So we encourage you, bring more in. And also bring in anything you need to debug or reflash your device just in case. We also encourage you to bring any adapters or extenders if you'll need it for plugging into our systems. We do have a few on hand, but they may be used up for other products at that time. So please just bring your own so there is no delays. Now logistics. Please no photos. Everybody is under a usage agreement, which does include no photos. If you would like a photo of your team or your own equipment, just let us know. If we know about it ahead of time, there's usually no problem. During the week, you may see some IOL people in there taking generic photos of the Plugfest event. If you're unsure, let any of the IOL staff know, just so that we can be sure. Here's some travel information. If you do require a visa to travel, please contact me and I will provide that to you. Our shipping address is located right here. Please ensure that the equipment arrives by the Friday before the event. When the equipment arrives, we will place it on your table for you so that it's waiting for you as soon as you get there. We have some hotel and other travel information on our website, and I provided a couple links here for you. If you are driving, a lot of you may stay in Portsmouth. There is a parking lot. It's about a 10-minute walk from the IOL. We will set it up so that there is a parking code. So you don't have to pay for parking all week, but it is only good for this campus crossing visitor lot. And between the lot and the IOL, you will pass by 3 different coffee shops, so there is plenty of caffeine for everybody. If you do not want to park in this lot, there is street parking, and there are meters located on the road. So as I mentioned before, the Plugfest runs Monday through Thursday. Doors open at 8 a.m. and depending on the schedule for the day, we usually lock up around 6 p.m. Monday, we will have a kickoff meeting at 11 a.m. So please try to get there between 8 or 9 for setup so that you don't miss the kickoff meeting. Every day we will have light breakfast, lunch, snacks, and coffee provided. The schedule will go out probably a week after the registration closes, which is going to be October 19th. One other thing that is not listed here is we usually have a social on Wednesday nights, and more information on that is to come. So here is the link to the registration page for the NVMe Plugfest. And again, registration closes October 19th. We require no more than 2 products registered. Additional products will be put on a waiting list. So if there is space available after the registration closes, I will contact you and let you know that there is availability and add your additional products to the schedule. There is also a limit of 4 engineers per company. If you do want to send additional engineers, there is a small fee for that, but I can work with you on that. Tim mentioned the ICC calls earlier, but here's some more information on that. And as we come to our closing, I want to remind everybody that it is going to be November in the Northeast, so it might be sunny, it might be snowing, or we might have a hurricane, so please pack accordingly. Could be really cold, could be warm. So here's the contact information for Tim and myself. We thank you all for joining us, and we did have a few questions that came in that we will be addressing now.
Sure, Kerry. I see one of the questions that is, what's the latest revision of Interact? That is 10.0A, and we will be releasing a 10.0B by the end of this week or early next week. That is probably the one we would use for the Plugfest. But if there was some major issue that came up that would warrant a 10.0C between now and the Plugfest, then we would make that happen. But at this point, we're envisioning it being 10.0B that would be used during that Plugfest. Another question that I see is, are we going to support NVMe over InfiniBand? We really haven't had that much interest in InfiniBand or NVMe over InfiniBand at this point. At the last Plugfest, we were only one target away from being able to have NVMe over iWarp actually as a proof of concept, but we just needed that one more target in order to inform the indoor so the industry, then we would do it, and obviously it would be brought to the NVMe ICC as a potential proof of concept that worked. So that's something that we could do, but it really depends upon participation from you, the industry. I see another question here about specific settings for NVMe over TCP test configurations, and really there was nothing. The first time we ran it across our corporate network from our seating space into our cold room. So it went through corporate switches, and what we're doing next is actually putting it across the switches, the Mellanox switches that the switches were already set up with whatever configuration they needed. Obviously, they were on the same VLANs, but really it was a simple configuration that they were able to run across. Okay, I think my audio might be breaking up, but I guess I'll just mention that again, that the NVMe over TCP testing that we did not require any specific switch settings, and it was really over our corporate network. And we're going to be actually moving that to our test switches that we have in our cold room, and we'll do that probably in the next week. We do take traces of everything, whether it be RoCE, fiber channel, or TCP. That's definitely a critical tool for us. And let's see. One other. I had mentioned that we use the Teledyne LaCroix tools on Windows 10. It is available to run on other Windows version, but we've focused on 10 as that's what we've recommended as using. And all of our, another question would be, all of our PC edition software is actually distributed through Box. Okay. I have one other question is the exact host side. I believe this is for TCP. Yeah, kernel 411 for the NVMe TC driver is available. Yes, we are using that today. And actually, I do have one more that's talking about PC edition for I believe it's RoCE for ten is appropriate, or could we use something higher? You really need to stick within the guidelines of our release notes in terms of what kernels you use when we're dealing with PC Edition. And this is due to the requirements that we have that for TNVMe. And so you want to make sure that you stick to exactly the kernels that we mentioned. All right. So I do have one other question that just came in that's talking about NVMe over RoCE and asking what kind of priority flow control settings be allowed for switches and initiators. And this is something that we're hoping to talk about in a few conference calls over the next few weeks before the event. If you were part of the NVMe over RoCE Plugfest #9 that happened back in June, then I have all your email and contact information, and I'll be reaching out to you either tomorrow or the next day to set up times that would be good for everyone to have some calls so that we could try to coordinate what settings and what features, whether they be ECN, ETS, PFC, congestion notification, DCB-X, what actually features of DCB is the industry looking for us to actually perform a proof of concept for towards the end of this particular Plugfest 10. So at this point, I don't have the settings, but what I'd be looking for is during those conference calls to have everybody participate and actually bring to the table what they're able to support, what we can do in the reasonable amount of time that we have during this Plugfest week for this proof of concept in order to show some key features of DCB to industry. And I think that's all of the questions that we have at the moment. Okay. Well, if that's all the questions, I'd like to thank everyone for joining and listening, and I hope you found it informative. We look forward to seeing you in a few weeks here at the IOL, and have a successful event. Have a great day.